Today, I want to share with you about fear of loss, and more specifically, trusting that God is always faithful, because that's not always something that we remember that God is faithful, although He is, although we know in the back of our head, in the back of our mind, in our heart, that God is faithful. Sometimes we forget that He actually is faithful, especially when we go through crisis in life. And I want to start this guide today by reading a couple of scriptures. The first scripture is Lamentations chapter 3, verse 20 and 22. That's Lamentations 3, 20 and 22. And it says, "I will never forget this awful time, as I grieve over my loss. Yet I still dare to hope when I remember this. The faithful love of the Lord never ends. His mercies never cease." And the second scripture I want to read to you is Psalms chapter 40, verses 1 and 2. That's Psalms 40, verse 1 and 2. And it says, "I waited patiently for the Lord to help me, and He turned to me and heard my cry. He lifted me out of the pit of despair, out of the mud and the mire. He set my feet on solid ground and steadied me as I walked along." And if you're like me, you probably like to work hard. I like to work hard. I've mentioned this in previous weeks, that it feels really good. You rest really good at night after a long, hard work day. We work hard to feed our families. We work hard to do well in our jobs. We work hard to raise our children with good manners. We work hard to take care of our families, our parents. We work hard for our neighbors. We work hard for our communities, and then we work hard to save a little bit of money, put a little bit of money in savings, to reach some goals, to plan for retirement someday, because we know that someday our bodies are going to be frail and they're not going to have the strength that they do when you're young. And one day, when the sun is bright, the stock market is up, we might be tempted to pat ourselves on the back and say, "I did it. I accomplished this." But we don't got this. We all have a rainy day. We're one phone call away or one pandemic away from hitting rock bottom. And you know what's rock bottom? You know what has a rock bottom? A pit. So I want you to take a moment to reflect on this question. If you're watching this online or you're there with the group, go ahead and pause the video and reflect on this question. Do you ever feel like you're at the bottom of a pit? Do you ever feel like you are at the bottom of the pit? Let's take a little moment and share. All right, good. Now that we're done sharing, let me share this with you. We build houses and skyscrapers and businesses as a society, right? And we build programs and we build legacies and lives. And yet that pit that I was just talking about mocks us. This year, this pit of a pandemic has mocked all of us. So how do we go on from there? How do we keep going? You know what's cool about a pit? Yeah, there's something cool about a pit, believe it or not. It's quiet. It helps us to reflect. It helps us to pray. It helps us to remember that when things were going well and we thought that we did it, it helps us to remember that we didn't do it. That God did it all along. And it helps us to remember that when we lean on Him, when we rely on Him, He lifts us up. He takes care of us. He is faithful in the midst of a loss. And this is a season where I think that we've all experienced some loss or another, some more than others. I realize that, but nonetheless, we have all lost something. And in the middle of this, I want you to take a moment to reflect on this second question that says, what helps you to remember that God is faithful? Well, once God lifts us up out of that pit, we are again on solid ground. But we need to remember, we need to not forget that it was God who brought us back on solid ground. These moments of pits, of rock bottom, change us. They humble us. And it reminds us that it's time to get back to work. But although we may have lost something, we have to remember that perhaps we've gained something also. Because God is faithful. He doesn't take, He is a giver. And although there are things that are being removed from us, maybe our pride, maybe our lack of humility in this moment of trial, He is giving us something greater. And it's back our humility, back our trust, and our confidence and our reliance in Him.